All right, this summer we got a big movie that's coming out, and it's certainly going to affect comics. James Gunn's Supergirl is hitting theaters this June, and it isn't just another DC movie on the calendar. And if you're a comic collector or investor paying attention, this is one of those moments where the ground starts shifting before everybody else notices because this movie doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists because Gunn's Superman last year really worked, and not just financially, but culturally. And that matters because DC hasn't had sustained momentum like this in years. I mean, literally. Just given the sheer success of what Marvel had done, DC wasn't able to keep up. But it looks like they have reinvented themselves under Gunn and are well on their way. And so the Superman reboot did what it needed to do. It restored trust in DC Comics, and it showed that audiences are willing to buy back into DC when the storytelling is coherent and character driven. And Supergirl is the next real test for that momentum turning into a universe. I was going to make this an Action 252 video, but just given all that's going on with this particular movie, I thought it made more sense to really get into it because there's a lot of characters that are appearing. And what's exciting about this movie isn't just Supergirl, but it's all the characters expected to orbit this film and what it says about the direction of the DCU as a whole. And so we're not talking about a one-off origin story here with this film. I mean, we're talking about connective tissue. Early buzz points towards appearances or strong references to Superman himself, which makes sense given the shared Kryptonian legacy and the fact that Gunn has made it clear that these characters aren't operating in silos anymore. There's also heavy expectation around Brainiac, and if that happens, that's massive. Because Brainiac isn't just a villain, he's a world builder. He opens the door to Kandor, Kryptonian history, cosmic DC, and in the world of comics, I mean, Action 242, tough book and high grade. A lot of DC books are pretty tough and high grade, at least the ones that you want. And that one too is just a tremendous book. And so the fact that we are going to be getting some Brainiac for sure in the Superman sequel, but probably in Supergirl too, could be very, very big for that book. And you're also hearing and seeing rumblings about the presence of Lobo, which fits Gunn's sensibilities perfectly. And suddenly this movie isn't just Supergirl's story, but it's shaping up to be a bridge to a wider DC cosmic landscape. And I think that's why this matters for comics, because DC thrives when there's clarity and confidence at the top. And right now, for the first time in a long time, there's actual excitement instead of cautious optimism. Comic collectors aren't just reacting to trailers anymore. They're starting to think 2 or 3 steps ahead, and that's where the opportunity lives. When Superman came out and succeeded in 2025, it didn't just spike a couple of books for a weekend. It reintroduced Superman as culturally relevant again, and that has a long tail because Supergirl benefits directly from that. Because she's not being introduced as a risky reboot. She's being introduced as a continuation of a universe that people already like. And so whenever there's DC momentum, I think people immediately start chasing the obvious stuff. Supergirl first appearances, Brainiac keys, maybe some spec modern books. And that's fine. But if you're thinking like an investor instead of a hype buyer, the book that's going to stand above everything else really is Action 252. Action Comics 252 is the first appearance of Supergirl, and more importantly, it's the first appearance of Kara Zor-El. And it's one of those books that has always mattered, but hasn't always been treated with the respect it deserves, at least as far as I can tell. And Action 252 is not a modern spec play. It isn't dependent on opening weekend numbers. It doesn't need a post-credit scene to justify its value. It's foundational DC history. And so regardless of the movie, I mean, I think the movie can drive it up, but regardless of the movie, it's still a big-time top key. that you should feel very comfortable with owning. And so I think that what makes Action 252 so strong right now is that it sits at the intersection of nostalgia and future relevance. This book has survived multiple market cycles, multiple DC reboots, multiple eras where Supergirl was either prominent or sidelined, and it still never stopped being important. And I think that's what you want in long term hold. This will be on our buy list when we do a video on this. So I'll probably do it some point in time down the road, not right now because I'm, putting this out for the time being. But it's absolutely a book that should be on your list because it's not built on hype. It's not a book that collapses. It's built on first appearance gravity. And Supergirl isn't a new character being tested. She's a legacy character and she's being reintroduced properly. And I think that's a massive difference when you're talking about Silver Age characters that are still relevant today. And I think there's also a psychological component here that collectors tend to underestimate because Superman's success reset how people emotionally feel about DC now. And Supergirl is going to ride that wave. And so when audiences emotionally reconnect with the universe, collections and collectors tend to follow. And when collectors follow, the books with real history and scarcity separate themselves from everything else. And so Action 252 isn't a book everyone can own in high grade, but population matters here. And supply matters here, and demand doesn't need to be manufactured. So that's why this book doesn't spike and crash the way modern keys do. It trends, it stair steps, and then it holds. And so I do want to talk a little bit about timing because timing is everything in this hobby. I do not recommend that you chase a book down on June 1st. Its prices are going to be sky high. Supergirl is coming out at the end of June. And that means months of conversation, speculation, interviews, trailers, you name it. And all of that media is going to reinforce her place in the DC hierarchy. So books that are going to sell around that time are going to go for top dollar. And that sustained visibility matters more than a single weekend box office number because it means that collectors will have time to think about it afterward. Like that'll continue to linger on. And so there should be gains long term from the book because, there's still Superman excitement going on right now. And we're 8 months removed from when Superman came to the box office last summer. Then you compound that with the Action 9.0 sale, the Superman 1 9.0 sale on Heritage. The Action was on Comic Connect recently. And then the Superman was like on the national news from Heritage. There's just a ton of excitement around it right now. The other thing worth noting is that James Gunn has been very intentional about making his characters feel earned rather than flashy. And that bodes well for the longevity of these books because this isn't about cameo overload or shock value. It's obviously about building a universe that can last a decade. And if that happens, then Supergirl isn't just a movie character, she's a pillar. Think about Iron Man and what that's done for Marvel. Like it wasn't a one-off, then it turned into a trilogy, and now you've got like years of runs, with some of the Marvel characters. And we've also seen it play out with other DC characters before, like Superman, like Batman, Wonder Woman. And so Supergirl is closer to that tier than I think some people are willing to admit. That's also why I think that Action 252 is one of the most underrated DC keys available from the Silver Age. And so I think that when we zoom out and we look at the bigger picture here, DC and James Gunn is quietly setting itself up for a multi-year run of relevance, and collectors who are going to kind of wait for that are probably going to end up paying more. And so that doesn't mean you should chase everything with an S shield on it. It means you identify the book that already has the history, already has scarcity, and already has cultural weight, and you let the media machine do what it does best, which is remind people why these characters matter in the first place. And so, from a comic collecting perspective, in my opinion, Supergirl isn't going to be just a movie, it's going to be a signal. And Action Comics 252 is the clearest, cleanest way to position yourself if you believe that this DC momentum is real and sustainable. Now, that doesn't mean you need to predict the future perfectly. You don't. You just need to recognize when the foundation is already there. And right now, for DC, it is. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you got value out of this. And if you did, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future episodes covering comics, graded collecting, and the market behind the hobby. I'll see you on the next one.